Maxine Waters gripped the microphone just an inch from her parted lips, but for the first time in 4 decades, the outspoken representative had nothing to say to Senator John Kennedy. She had snatched it exactly as she always did, swiftly, intending to interrupt a man mid-sentence, and the entire room caught the faint noises of that sudden motion, her sleeve brushing the mesh, the sharp inhale preceding her speech. However, the anticipated words simply failed to emerge. Across the expansive table, John Kennedy didn't even glance up, remaining seated with a pair of crisp pages resting before him. He kept his signature Louisiana drawl subdued, realizing he no longer required its charm. "Take all the time you want, Congresswoman," he remarked. Having waited 3 years, another minute wouldn't hurt. The deep breath she had drawn escaped her lips without carrying a single syllable, and somewhere in the back rows, a stifled laugh broke the tension. To comprehend exactly how America's most vocal advocate for housing lost her audience to someone she had just openly dismissed as a clueless old man, you need to rewind about 40 minutes. Back then, she still firmly believed she was in total control of the hearing. That morning, the chamber was crowded, far more packed than a typical joint subcommittee on housing ever managed to attract. Rumors had circulated the previous evening that Kennedy requested this session, and his personal involvement typically guaranteed a rough afternoon for someone. Camera crews were positioned 3 layers deep against the rear wall, the recording lights glowing steadily. The viewing gallery was jammed all the way to the side railings, with legislative staff occupying spaces the marshals normally kept clear. Over in the third row, seated on the aisle, was an older gentleman wearing a faded, soft-elbowed field jacket, clutching a brown paper grocery bag, its top folded down tightly, holding it like it was his sole possession in the world. At that moment, nobody realized he had surrendered his designated speaking slot on the witness schedule that very morning, nor did they know who received it or the reason behind his choice. That revelation would arrive later, striking at the absolute worst possible instant for the woman presiding at the center of the table. Maxine Waters made her entrance exactly as she always did, projecting an aura that the room had been anticipating her arrival and should feel fortunate the wait was over. She dropped her leather folder onto the wooden desk with a sharp, authoritative clap. She dragged the microphone a precise half-inch closer, opened her bottled water, poured it, and positioned the glass with exact intent. She executed every single motion with deliberate slowness, ensuring the cameras captured her as the most composed individual present. Gazing across the desk at the Louisiana senator, noting his reading glasses, folded hands, and unassuming gray demeanor, she concluded, just as she had with countless men before him, that victory was already hers. When the committee chairman finally yielded the floor for her introductory remarks, she seized the opportunity like an expert, picking up a well-worn tool. "Before we pretend this is a real conversation," she began, "let me address what everyone here is too polite to say. I have spent more than 40 years working on the issue of housing in this country for decades, and I am being asked today to sit across from a man who thinks he is going to teach me something about it." Slowly and purposefully, she rotated her head toward Kennedy, allowing the entire room to witness the deliberate gesture. "Senator, I have read your little bill. I've read your quotes. You are a clueless old man. You are a clueless old man from a state where the answer to every hard problem is a folksy story and a fishing metaphor. You have never once in your life stood in a housing project that wasn't on a postcard. You have never knocked on a door in South Central, and you have the nerve to fly up here and lecture me in front of these cameras about poor people, about my people." A distinct noise rippled through the gallery. It wasn't a gasp, but rather something noticeably cooler. "And let me tell the folks watching at home who he really speaks for," she continued, her momentum building as her familiar engine turned over. "He speaks for people who have never lived next to real poverty in their lives. People who drive past it on the freeway, lock their car doors, and call it somebody else's problem. People who think being old and being right are the same thing. They are not. So no, Senator, you do not get to educate me today. I was doing this work before you switched parties." She leaned back into her chair, convinced her fierce monologue had hit the mark. It certainly had landed, but in the wrong place. The exact demographics she had just vividly described, the ones locking their vehicle doors, the ones who assume advanced age implies foolishness, were currently leaning close to their television screens in Baton Rouge, Biloxi, and numerous regions she had never once driven through. With a confident smile, she had purposely insulted every single one of them on national television. John Kennedy showed no reaction to being labeled a clueless old man. He never did react to that kind of thing. It was the first thing people learned about him and the last thing they remembered. He sat with his hands folded, his glasses resting low, embodying the deep patience of a man who has spent real hours in a boat waiting on a fish that is not yet hungry. He allowed her to completely finish, and he allowed the applause she had half expected to fail to come. He let the silence after her statement stretch a half-second past comfortable, and then past that, until a few people in the gallery began to wonder whether he had heard her at all. He leaned toward his own microphone, and his very first action was to completely agree with her. "Congresswoman," he stated, "I want to thank you for that, and I want to say for the record, so there's no confusion later, that you're right about one thing. I am old," he paused, "and I have on more than one occasion in my life been clueless. My wife will sign an affidavit." A handful of people laughed before they could help themselves, then caught their composure. "I'm just a country lawyer," Kennedy continued, which was the exact phrase he always utilized right before methodically dismantling an opponent, though she did not know that yet. "I learned my law in a courthouse in Louisiana, where the air conditioner rattled and the judge had known you since you were knee-high. In a place like that, you learn there's only two kinds of questions in this world. The kind of person can answer plain, and the kind of person spends a whole lot of pretty words not answering. I'm only going to ask you the first kind today. Small stuff, the kind of thing a slow old man can keep up with." "I'll try to go slowly for you," Waters retorted. "I'd be grateful, ma'am. I surely would." He still didn't reach for his prepared documents. That deliberate delay was the exact warning sign that seasoned observers knew to look for. He never went for the throat while you were still braced for it. He asked the small things first, easy things, almost kind. "Would you say," he inquired, "that you know your district better than anybody sitting in this room?" "I would say I know it better than you know your own." She fired back. "Yes, I believe that I do," he nodded thoughtfully, resembling a man complimenting a neighbor's garden. "And would you say you've given your life to the folks in it, the ones who can't make rent, the ones sleeping rough?" "I have given everything to them," she declared, raising her chin. "Everything, while men like you wrote them off." "So, I think it's fair to say," Kennedy smoothly continued, his tone gentle as church, "that there is not one person in this room who cares more about where the poor folks of your district lay their head at night than you do." "That would be fair. That is the truest thing you've said all morning, Senator." "Good." He clasped his hands a little tighter, and the trap closed its first quiet inch. "I want that on the record before we start. Not because I'm going to trick you with it, because you're proud of it. You said it plain. You meant it. Nobody put it in your mouth. Nobody cares more than you. Hold on to that, Congresswoman. Hold it real tight. I'm going to need it here in a few minutes." "I can hold a simple idea, Senator," she replied. "I never doubted it, ma'am." Now, he reached down and lifted the first page. He executed the motion without any drama at all, picking it up the way you'd lift a grocery receipt off the counter, reading it once to himself while the room watched him. That watching built a pressure that no shouting could have ever built. "I drove a street this morning," Kennedy revealed, "before the sun was all the way up. I had a fellow drive me on account of, I don't know, Los Angeles, being a clueless old man and all. It's a street in your district, 43rd. I wrote the name down so I'd get it right because I didn't want you telling me later I made it up." He read the street's name directly from the page, plain, with no flourish. "And I want to tell the folks at home what I saw on it. I didn't see a statistic. I'm no good with statistics that early. I saw tenths. I counted them because counting is about my speed. I counted past 30, and I quit because a man came out of one of them in a Dodgers jacket, barefoot, to ask my driver for the time, and I got embarrassed to be sitting there counting human beings like they were fence posts. He placed the document flat and smoothed it once with 2 fingers. There was a man on that street folding a blanket, he noted. The way my own daddy used to fold a tarp over the woodpile, real careful, corner to corner, like the folding was the one thing left in the day he could do right. And there was a girl, couldn't have been 12, walking to school past all of it with her chin up and her eyes straight ahead, the way you teach a child to walk past a thing you can't fix. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I know that girl's name, but somebody in this room is supposed to. He peered up over his rims. That street, he emphasized, is about a 9-minute drive from your district office. I know because I had the fella time it. 9 minutes. When's the last time you made that drive, Congresswoman? Not a press conference, not a ribbon, the drive. When did you last stand on that street? The chamber fell quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when everyone desperately wants the answer and is a little afraid of it. Waters did not reach for the answer. Instead, she immediately reached for the oldest tool she owned. I know exactly what this is, she declared, her voice rising, finding its old strength because anger was a country where she had always felt safe. This is a white man from Louisiana sitting there telling a black woman she doesn't know her own community. This is a man who has never been black a day in his life, never been a woman a day in his life, never been poor a day in his life, presuming to grade me on my own people. You drove down one street this morning, and you think you've earned the right to question 40 years. That is not oversight, Senator. That is arrogance, and everyone watching knows exactly what flavor of arrogance it is. And for a moment, give her this, because it was real. The room shifted with her. It was a clean punch that had landed 100 times in 100 rooms, and the muscle memory was still in it. A reporter's pen started moving fast. A staffer behind her nodded hard twice, and a woman near the front who had been leaning toward Kennedy now looked down at her hands, uncertain. The current was hers, and it held for about 20 seconds, but Kennedy did not flinch. He did not soften, and he did not do the thing the words were built to make him do. No, ma'am, he replied quietly. I have never been any of those things. You're right. So I won't stand here and tell you I know that street better than you. I'd be a fool. He let a beat go by. I'm only telling you I was on it this morning, and I'm asking you a question a clueless old man can ask. When were you? She did not answer that either. She actively put America's poorest people on a list of things she cared about more than anybody in the room. And then a country lawyer asked her one plain question about a street 9 minutes from her office, and she reached for a word to make him sit down instead of answering it. Kennedy let the silence breathe, being exceptionally good at silence. I'd let it go right there, he confessed, if it was just the one street. A person can't be everywhere. Lord knows I've missed things in my own state I should have seen. I told a room one time I had Louisiana's budget under control, and then I drove home and could not find the receipt for my own truck tires. A wave of warm laughter rippled on his side now. So, I'm not up here to crucify a woman for not being on a street one morning, but this isn't one street, Congresswoman. This is a dance, and I think the people who mailed you their $25 have earned the right to watch somebody count the steps out loud just this once. He reached down for the second page. You live in a house, he stated, a fine house, and I want to be real careful here because I would never begrudge a soul a fine house. I've got one myself, more or less, if you don't look too hard at the porch. You worked, you earned, you bought a house. That's America, and I'd shake your hand for it in any parking lot in the country. He gently placed the page down. But here's the small thing I can't get past, and maybe you can help me. You being from the community and me being from the bayou, your house isn't in your district. My house was in the district when I bought it, she snapped back. The lines were redrawn. That is public record, and you know it. I do know it, ma'am. You're exactly right. The lines moved, he nodded agreeably. So now you live a few blocks the other side of a line you helped draw in a quiet part of town with trees, and the street I drove this morning is 9 minutes from the office and a little further from where you sleep. And every 2 years you mail 200,000 of your neighbors a piece of paper telling them who to vote for. He lightly tapped the document. "I want to ask you about that piece of paper, Congresswoman. The mailer." A sudden shift altered her expression. She clearly recognized this treacherous ground. "The slate mailer," Kennedy pronounced, tasting the unfamiliar word. "I had to have it explained to me twice, being slow. Here's what I understand. Other candidates pay your campaign to get their name on it, and your campaign pays a company to run it. And the company that runs it," he glanced down at his notes, then back up at her, "it's your daughter's, Karen's. And the folks at home don't have to take my word for any of it, because it's not my word. It's your own filings with the Federal Election Commission, with your signature on the bottom. Over $1 million, ma'am, across the years from the campaign to the family. That is a gross and deliberate distortion of a perfectly legal arrangement that the FEC itself approved," she countered. "And you know it. And it's your own filing, Congresswoman. You signed it." "And then last year," Kennedy calmly resumed once it had quieted enough for his normal voice to be heard, not raising his voice to speak over the remaining chuckles. "The FEC fined that exact campaign $68,000 for money that came in over the limit and for cash that went out the door it shouldn't have. And your very own campaign lawyer signed the paper that explicitly said, yes, that happened." Now, he aligned the second document flush against the first. "I'm not a forensic accountant. I can barely run my own checkbook. We covered that. But I can surely read a grocery receipt. And what this receipt says is that the $25 money from folks on that street I drove this morning went up the road to your campaign, and a good piece of it came back down inside the family. That's not against the law, ma'am. You're right. I double-checked." He looked up, and his demeanor shifted to something close to tired wonder. "It's just an hard thing to explain to a desperate man living inside a tent 9 minutes away." "You want to reduce my entire life?" she hissed, her voice dropping low and accelerating with fury. "Now a whole life of public service to 2 pieces of paper you printed out this morning to manufacture a video? I came up through this city when nobody handed me anything. I sat defiantly in rooms where I was the only woman, the only black face, and I was repeatedly told to wait my turn, and I did not wait. And that fierce determination is exactly why I am sitting in this chair today. I have successfully passed laws that put solid roofs over heads, all while you were giving speeches about catfish. I have buried dear friends who died on those very streets, and I have held their grieving mothers. And you want to make me a soundbite? You want to take all of that tremendous struggle, an entire lifetime, and shrink it down small enough to fit on a phone? Well, I am a United States Congresswoman. I have fiercely earned this chair, and I will not be lectured on poverty by a tourist who merely drove through it once before breakfast." Kennedy removed his glasses, folded the arms together with agonizing slowness, and placed them onto the desk beside his 2 printed pages. The entire room collectively leaned forward, suddenly hypersensitive, because the unassuming gray man had become terrifyingly still. "Congresswoman," he stated, and all the musical cadence had completely drained from his voice, leaving it chillingly flat, level, and cold. "Nobody up here is reducing the value of your life's work. You undoubtedly came up hard. You built something, and that is real. I was sincere when I offered that handshake, but that is not what's sitting on this table." He forcefully pressed one index finger onto the first document and his other finger onto the second. "What's on this table is the exact claim you yourself made not 20 minutes ago. The claim you asked me to hold on to. You confidently told me there was not one person in this room who cared more deeply about where the poor folks of your district sleep than you do. You stated it plainly, and you were fiercely proud of it." He paused, letting the weight of her own words settle. "I held on to it, ma'am, exactly as you requested." And then he executed the one tactical maneuver that no one in the chamber had properly braced for. "There's a man sitting behind you," Kennedy announced, his gaze shifting. "Third row, end of the aisle." He officially secured a dedicated slot on today's witness list, his very own hard-won slot, his own guaranteed 5 minutes of speaking time. That is a profoundly rare opportunity that dedicated advocates will literally fight a year just to secure, and he voluntarily gave it up. He freely gave his precious time away to a clueless old man visiting from Louisiana. So I could sit here and publicly ask you the desperate questions he has been relentlessly mailing your district office for 3 solid years. Questions that have never once received an answer. Kennedy stared directly past Waters, focusing on the faded field jacket and the tightly folded paper grocery bag. Sir, you certainly don't have to oblige, but if you want to stand up, I strongly expect this entire room would very much like to see the face of somebody from the 43rd District who actually lives within its borders. The older gentleman slowly rose to his feet, not overtly theatrical about his movements, without breaking down crying or violently shaking his hands. That quiet, dignified composure was precisely what instantly sucked all the remaining air out of the hearing room, because every single spectator had instinctively braced themselves for a highly emotional, tragic breakdown. What they witnessed instead was devastatingly calm. He reached one hand deep into his brown grocery bag and extracted a thick, heavily rubber-banded stack of envelopes, the corners of the brick visibly softened and worn from being carried for months. He held the stack up, not aggressively high, just high enough. "These are all mine," he stated plainly. "These are letters I personally sent to her office. Every single one of them bears her office's official intake stamp on the back. 3 full years of received stamps." He slowly rotated the massive stack so the gathered crowd could clearly view the faded dates penciled across the exteriors. "I am a military veteran, and I proudly reside within your district, ma'am. The 43rd. I've been struggling out there for the entirety of the time you've been sitting here loudly telling this man he doesn't understand it. I understand it perfectly fine. Do you want to know the absolute only thing I don't understand?" He gently placed the massive brick of letters down onto the wooden railing in front of him, treating the stack as if it were the sole valuable item he owned, because it very nearly was. "I cannot comprehend how a person eagerly writes back to a man in Louisiana whom she has never even met, but she never once managed to write back to me, and I am sitting a mere 9 minutes away." He sat back down and didn't utter another syllable, simply because he didn't need to. The entire atmosphere of the room pivoted instantly, and every single head forcefully turned back to stare at Maxine Waters. Kennedy, moving with agonizing slowness, quietly collected his 2 printed pages and squared their edges perfectly one final time. "You forcefully called me a clueless old man, Congresswoman," he stated softly, "and maybe I truly am, but I managed to learn that gentleman's name before you ever did. I learned it by reading it off a discarded envelope early this morning. He has been your direct constituent for over 3 years, and it somehow required a visiting tourist to actually read his mail." He placed his compiled notes flat. "You do not represent a district, ma'am. You simply return to a house. There is a massive fundamental difference between those 2 things, and a frustrated man wearing a field jacket just held undeniable proof of that, up for the entire country to witness. You didn't just accidentally miss driving down one single street. You finally just got caught completely failing to drive down any of them." Not a single person dared to laugh at that brutally honest assessment. That particular statement bypassed humor, sinking heavily into the deeper core of the room where genuine political judgments get decided. Maxine Waters instinctively reached for her microphone. It was pure reflex, the exact aggressive maneuver that had never once failed her throughout 40 years of intense political combat. The rapid snatch designed to forcefully cut a man off, aggressively seize back the floor, and loudly flood the air with so many words that the devastating underlying question would be completely drowned out. Every single recording camera captured her hand violently closing tight around the neck, the tiny distinct rustle of her suit sleeve brushing harshly against the mesh, and the sharp, desperate intake of breath she pulled in right before she unleashed her voice. That exact breath that for 40 years had flawlessly, unfailingly been immediately followed by an unstoppable torrent of words. And yet the words refused to come. Her jaw was visibly unhinged. The breath was fully in her lungs. The electronic microphone was live and positioned barely an inch away, and the highly polished machinery of a 40-year career was fully cocked, loaded, and ready to fire, and nothing emerged from it. She remained frozen in her chair, lips slightly parted in shock, gripping a perfectly functional microphone. The absolute only defective element in the entire room was that the most famously quoted woman in American housing politics had finally been cornered with the single devastating question she could not successfully talk her way out of, reaching for her oldest, most trusted weapon, only to discover it empty in her hand. The laughter ignited at the very back of the room before anyone consciously gave themselves permission to release it. Far more definitive and permanent than simple cruelty, it was the unmistakable sound of a crowded room that had suddenly, collectively stopped being terrified of someone. The sound rolled forward from the rear rows as the gentleman who had previously removed his glasses to wipe away tears of mirth now put them back on, only to snatch them off again in disbelief. While the loyal staffer, who had been nodding so aggressively in support of her boss just moments before now, suddenly stared intensely at a microscopic spot on the table. Because here is the brutal truth about that specific type of laughter. The devastating reality Waters fully comprehended in the agonizing half-second it took to break over her. Once a room officially stops fearing you, you simply never get that fear back. You might secure a victory in the next scheduled hearing and perhaps the one following that, but that foundational aura of intimidation does not return, and there is no brilliantly crafted statement, no desperate media clarification, and certainly no glossy campaign mailer expensive enough to restore it. The committee chairman cleared his throat into the tense quiet and formally inquired whether the gentle lady wished to issue a direct response. She profoundly did not wish to respond. She physically could not. The entire assembled audience now clearly knew there was a massive difference, and they realized that stark difference was the absolute core of the entire story. That agonizing silence featuring the unhinged jaw, the fully functional microphone, and the heavy breath lacking any words behind it, that is the definitive, unforgettable sound of a 40-year political legacy instantly crumbling and changing shape on live television. By the time the chairman's gavel officially brought the session to a close, the viral video clip had already been christened with a name, and the title was certainly not kind toward her. Someone had quickly edited it down to a brutally clean 40-second montage that required no external commentary, simply showing Waters aggressively labeling the old man as clueless, followed by the old man pleasantly agreeing with his age, cutting to the struggling veteran standing tall, displaying his thick brick of officially stamped envelopes, and highlighting the frantic grab, the open mouth, the perfectly functional microphone, and the devastating nothingness. By mid-afternoon, you literally could not scroll for 10 consecutive seconds on any screen in America without the clip violently resurfacing again, and the general public was not actively arguing about its contents or debating the nuances of housing policy, district redistricting, or FEC regulations. There was nothing left to debate. Millions of people were simply sitting back and watching a powerful woman confidently reach for a microphone, come up completely empty on a continuous loop, and laugh. All the major evening news broadcasts opened their segments with the exact same damning freeze frame, displaying Waters' hand tightly gripping the mic, her mouth hanging ajar, while slightly blurred in the background stood an exhausted old man in a field jacket holding up a massive brick of ignored pleas. One prominent network even aired the footage underneath a lower third graphic that consisted of nothing but a single line pulled straight from the senator's plain text, displayed over a solid black background. She returns to a house, he returns to your district. The brutal words flawlessly did the work, and the devastating visual picture easily handled the rest. Meanwhile, the anonymous military veteran wearing the field jacket casually walked out of the federal building, his worn grocery sack neatly folded back down securely beneath his arm, where a local reporter managed to intercept him on the grand front steps to ask how he felt. The journalist was clearly expecting the standard tragic story, the dramatic emotional catch in the voice that perfectly anchors a news segment, but he flatly refused to give it to her, pausing to think about his answer as a subtle, dry smile briefly ghosted across his face. It was the highly specific, satisfied smile of a man who had just watched a massive conflict finally be settled, a moment he had been patiently waiting 3 long years to witness. "She will definitely write back to me now," he casually remarked, and that was all he had to say. He deposited the stack of envelopes into his coat pocket, descended the marble steps, and headed straight back toward the 43rd District, the exact one where he currently lived, and where she did not. That single devastating line went completely viral by the following morning, trending right alongside the original clip, because the entire nation instantly understood the profound truth of his statement deep within their bones. She'll write back now. Those simple words effectively accomplished what 3,000 of her aggressively shouted words had completely failed to do. And Senator John Kennedy, for his part, simply executed the exact same maneuver he always relied upon, which was nothing at all. He meticulously folded his 2 printed pages once precisely down the middle, smoothly slid them into the interior pocket of his tailored suit jacket, and calmly walked out of that chaotic hearing room without uttering one single additional word to anybody. Striding right past the frantic camera crews loudly calling his name down the echoing hall, past the swarm of eager reporters, and past the empty chair where the most fiercely quoted woman in American housing politics had finally, after 40 long years, run clean out of things to say. He had successfully obtained exactly what he had traveled there for, and it fit perfectly inside one small pocket. She had dedicated 40 years to arrogantly telling people they did not possibly understand her district, but it ultimately took just one old man she arrogantly called a tourist and one struggling veteran she had continuously refused to write back to clearly show the entire country that she did not actually live in it either. That is the undeniable reality regarding a physical roof, Congresswoman. You can author endless legislation regulating it. You can deliver passionate, fiery speeches advocating for it, and you can even mail 200,000 citizens a glossy piece of paper boasting about it every other election cycle. But you cannot fool the desperate man forced to sleep outside underneath a tent just 9 minutes from your headquarters because he acutely knows the one massive, undeniable fact you have spent an entire career attempting to loudly talk over. He knows exactly where you securely sleep at night, and thanks to today, so does everybody else in America. If this powerful story motivated you to stand up and cheer even once, please hit that like button so the algorithm carries it to more viewers who are completely tired of being labeled clueless by elites who refuse to practice what they preach. If you firmly believe a simple country lawyer just brilliantly spoke up for every single American who has ever been talked down to by someone who has never lived their struggles, please subscribe to this channel right now and leave just one single word in the comment section down below. Type the word received. Please share this video link with somebody who would feel this message deep in their bones. Your individual voice matters. Your hometown is not a punchline to be mocked, and the unvarnished truth, as it turns out, was patiently sitting in the 3rd row the entire time, quietly holding on to 3 years' worth of completely ignored mail.